Welcome to the May reading of the Milwaukie Poetry Series. I'm delighted that you're all here. It feels like we're moving into spring, actually. It was a little cloudy the first couple of days of the week, but we have sunshine. And the forecast is 80 degrees, I'm told, on the weekend. So that's pretty amazing. I'm Tom Hogan. I am the coordinator of the Milwaukie Poetry Series. So I want to welcome you all here tonight. We know, as I say, that you have other things that you could be doing at this time, but you're choosing to spend them here. So thank you very much for that. I also want to welcome everyone who is logged in on the live stream. Thank you very much for that, too. Thank you for taking the time to get the link and log in and be part of this reading tonight, which I've been looking forward to for quite a while. I want to make some thanks. There's always a lot of people to thank. City of Milwaukie for first, because they have been supportive from the beginning. I agree. Thank you very much. Thank you. And the Letting Library. The Letting Library has been supportive from the beginning through the days that we were at the Pond House, and then we had a transition. Thank you to the Letting Library. We were able to move into this beautiful, beautiful new library with this community room. Thank you to the Milwaukie Poetry Series Committee. So there are two of us here tonight, and I want to add David Filer. David came early, and so he was the help on the setup tonight. Kristen is back here. You've met Kristen already. She's been handing out the broadsides. So if anyone doesn't have a broadside of one of Eleanor's poems, Kristen is the person who is going to get that to you. And finally, we want to thank Willamette Falls Media and Josh Reynolds, who is over here behind the laptop and with the headphones on. So Josh is the person that makes this all go, and we refer to him as the magician, so, which he is. I want to welcome someone who's with us tonight, the Oregon Poet Laureate Emerita, Pauline Peterson, is right here in the front row. Thank you so much for everything you do and have done all the time. And thank you for being here with us tonight. Also with us is the president of the Oregon Poetry Association, Bob Sterry. And so Bob is going to say a few words about OPA.
Either a brave man or a fool. Time will tell. Yes, I am the president for reasons which defy logic and thermodynamic. So I just wanted to thank Tom personally, because I keep thanking him, but there's not enough thanks for Tom for what he does. It really is tremendous work to do this. What I want to say as president is, I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you are members of the Oregon Poetry Association? So, shamefully low number. Obviously, the solution is to join immediately. And then, because if you are a member of the OPA, you can enjoy a discount on our upcoming annual conference in October, and that will be on the 4th and 5th of October, and it is going to be at the Agate Beach Hotel, Best Western Hotel in Newport, and it is the first live conference that we've had since 2019, actually going to be live. So I'd like you all really to think about coming. And details will be posted on the OPA website in due course. But I will tell you one thing about the first keynote speaker who has signed on for the conference, and that is Marcus Lattimore, who is the winner of the Slamlandia contest and is an absolute marvel, full of energy and dynamism, and he is going to be the opening keynote at our conference. We will be also looking for workshop leaders. So if you have an idea for a workshop that will encourage people to write more poetry, better poetry, worse poetry, rubbish poetry, any kind of poetry, I think is essential for our culture to have that happen. So, and that will, of course, also be on the website once we get it updated. So it's going to take a little while. We have much work to do. So that's all I have to say. If you have any more questions about the work of the OPA, do not hesitate to come and talk to me later. Thank you, Tom.
You are welcome, and thank you. When that question came, do you, Bob Sterry, want to step up and be president of the OPA? You said yes, as have other people before you. So thank you for doing that. I want to say a couple of things about upcoming events. We have started our First Friday poetry reading, and we co-sponsor that with St. John the Evangelist. That's on the first Friday as part of what Milwaukie does for First Fridays. We are at the Episcopal Church, and this will be the second one. It's going to be on the first Friday in June, whatever date that is, and it's going to have a some Juneteenth theme. So that's the first Friday in June. Then the next three are going to be outdoors at Milwaukie Floral. So there'll be invitations for all of these. And then in October, we'll be back at St. John the Evangelist. Our poet next month is going to be Amelia Diaz-Ettinger. So we're looking forward to that. And that again is on the second Wednesday of the month here. So those are some things coming up. Before I introduce Eleanor, don't forget to silence your smartphones, other devices, if you have them. We wanted to have Eleanor come, and I'm delighted that she is here. It's my pleasure to introduce her. She and her husband Richard lived in the Santa Ana Canyon east of Salem from August 1994 until Labor Day 2020, when their house, outbuildings, and woods were destroyed in the Beachy Creek fire. They now live in the West Valley. Her latest poetry collection, Works of Wildfire, won the 2022 Grayson Books Chapbook Award. Previous publications include two books, Green November and No Constant Hues, and a chapbook, Only So Far. A past president of the Oregon Poetry Association and the National Federation of State Poetry Societies, she co-founded and chairs the Mid-Valley Poetry Society. She holds a PhD from the University of Toronto and has taught literature and writing at several Wisconsin colleges and universities, as well as Willamette University, and led poetry workshops for OPA, Sitka, and other literary and arts organizations. So, would you join me in welcoming tonight our poet for the evening, Eleanor Berry. Eleanor.
It is utterly wonderful to be here, and I marvel at what Tom has accomplished. 17 years of these monthly readings. Having organized a monthly reading series, I know, as some people here know, it's a lot of work, and I gave out after 8 years. So he's more than twice as many years. It truly is remarkable. And I'm delighted to be here in the company of another former OPA president who was also a long distance performer. She hung on there, again, a good deal longer than I did. And I am so glad that Bob Sterry is leading a board that's bringing back in-person OPA conferences. I loved in-person OPA conferences, and having one in Newport combines some of the wonderful things of OPA conferences with the Northwest Poets Concord, which I think some people here remember, that wonderful setting. Well, people expect me to be reading poems of fire, and I will, but that's not where I'm going to start. As I've been thinking about this reading, fire was a very powerful muse. I think we all have had experiences that have that function for us. They impel us to write. They compel us to write. But it's not the only one, as I think back on what has moved me similarly. And this, again, may be something that many of you have also experienced. For me, another such subject was my mother. And of course, it's hard to forget with all the commercial trappings that Mother's Day is 4 days away. So I thought, well, maybe I'll go back to a few of the mother poems. I'm sure the mother poems are not over. And they're among the poems I thought I'd lost completely after the fire. That's another story. As with the fire poems, writing them was a pretty complex act of witnessing and seeking understanding, and hoping that that witnessing and seeking would be of some value to others. So I maybe should say, in the fashion of warnings that precede so many presentations these days, these may be a little difficult. So I'm going to read 3 of them. The work of that power. If it had been you who came with tourniquet, test tubes, and needles into the hospital room where I was watching my mother dying open-mouthed, gasping, unconscious for breath, blank eyes wide, their luster out. If it had been you in the white lab coat instead of the tech I don't remember at all, remember only my turning the limp, almost fleshless arm over for the blood to be drawn when it failed to flow, saying, "Don't try again. I'll tell the doctor, no more tests." If it had been you before I knew you, would I have noticed your grimace? Would I have guessed it wasn't just the hopelessness of getting any blood that you were seeing, that you were taking in everything? The yellow daffodils, incandescent on the windowsill, diffusing their heavy fragrance, the wisps of faded auburn hair fanned out around the face, the ivory skin flaccid against the bone, the once beautiful head turning minute by minute to skull. Would I have noticed the awkward hunch of your shoulders? Would I have imagined how much you winced at having seen? If it had been you, would our eyes have met? Would you have understood why mine were dry? Would you have understood why I'd stayed away till this last day when she didn't know me? Could you have comprehended how, believing she had to break off for marriage and motherhood, her quickening career in the world. She had come to wield, in compensation, coercive power at home. Could you have perceived her ravaged body as the work of that power exercised against herself? Maybe I do need my water. Where is it? Exult. It is the first week of April. Spring has arrived in New England. I stand in a small cemetery with stones 2 centuries old. Stand amid a small circle of family. My husband, my father, my mother and father-in-law, 3 aunts, at a fresh dug grave where my mother's coffin waits to be lowered. Sunlight falls warm on my shoulders. A light breeze bears me wafts of warm earth. New grass is thickly sprouting green. Crocuses and daffodils are open wide. I unbutton my coat to the breeze, whisper to myself words remembered from Yeats. Be secret and exult. I do. I am Persephone needing no Demeter to bring spring to the world. It was not I, but Demeter who wed the dark, closing herself year upon year from the light, keeping the curtains drawn. Eating from the ripe pomegranate, its seeds afloat in ruby gel, I thrived, nourished with sun. Refusing food, my mother condemned herself to wastage. Now she is dead, and I survive. I have flown the nets of her prohibitions, which would have held me wrapped and wingless. She has rasped her last shallow breath. I breathe in deep this earth-rich April air. The last of these is a good deal gentler. The names of those colors. The name of that color is mauve, color of lavender steeped in tea. So picking up a friend's sweater slipped to the floor from the back of a chair recalls my mother. Certain colors do it, and the names of those colors: pink, lilac, mauve. A pink peignoir, grayed with age, she wore day in, day out, though she had hand-painted armoires packed with marvelous garments, each crisp as the day she bought it. She sat in her room, sipping tea and nibbling Melba toast, eating like a winter-starved doe. Her teapot's lilac-colored design of flowers is spotted and crossed with tea-brown freckles and lines. I had her pink cashmere pullover cleaned, but her scent still assails me as I draw it over my head, a faint, flowery scent, already bodiless, of mingled powder and perfume, Mary Chess, white lilac, and arpege. Opening the door of her bedroom she hadn't entered since she moved downstairs a decade before. We smell it, my father and I. We make the bed with lilac sheets, smooth out a pink silk and lace blanket cover kept folded away since she bought it. Was this what you wanted, Mother? To be distilled to this faint whisper of silk, this faint fragrance of no particular flowers, this touch of things you never wore or used, but kept, folding the fragrance in. These colors, soft and pale, fading until only their names whisper. Pink, lilac, mauve. Thank you. Wear myself out with those. Back before the fire, back before the pandemic, I had a little book called Only So Far, of what I'd call ruminations about words and things. And I will again read a sampling of 3. These are shorter, more maybe sort of whimsical. And this is the title poem, in that the title is buried inside it. So, Life with Words. Only a child, I heard that I was an only child. So I learned early, words can change like chameleons, depending where they're put. Only child, I was mostly alone. Others I saw only from outside. I couldn't see through their skin, couldn't see into the twin dark holes through which they looked out, saw me. Pupils, those holes were called. I went to school where I was a pupil. I looked, but could see only so far. Still in school, I married, became wife. Other young wives grew watermelon bellies, became mothers. I chose not to follow my own mother into that role she never played half so well as the ones where she'd starred in summer stock. Instead, I stayed, married, no children. Now friend after friend becomes grandmother. Never a mother. I have no need to be grand. Decades since I was a child, I'm still an only child. Now we're going to go back to the beginning, but I better drink a little water first. My voice is on a bit of a fragile state tonight. So. It started with alphabet blocks. The words I made with them were things. That's what held me entranced. The blocks were wood. They fit my kindergarten hands. 2 and 2 and 2 made 6 square sides of a block. 2 sides were carved with silhouettes of animals, familiar dog and cat, house, horse and cow, storybook wild wolf and bear. 2 other sides had flat-topped ridges like tiny boardwalks. The best two sides were embossed with plain capital letters my stubby forefinger could trace, letters on wooden cubes I'd line up, pushed together, thak, to spell out words. Those words were things, were real, more real than whatever they named. Solid shapes I could both see and feel. That's what I wanted to make. That's still what I want to make. This one, I don't know, maybe an intimation of something to follow. I didn't quite envision what. This has a read-in title. To arrange the deck chairs on the Titanic while it's sinking, to fiddle while Rome burns. Would it be so foolish after all? There would be the image, the sound of a created order held momentarily in the mind before it was consumed. Big things coming in your future, announces the paper strip I pull from the shattered fortune cookie. Only matter of time. Already, some years back, a friend told me she dreamed it, the big one, upheaving the dam upriver from here, loosing the waters behind it. Only matter of time. Till it hits, sends torrents roaring down the canyon toward us. Still, I spend hours arranging pictures on the walls of bedroom, guest room, living room, study. I want the painted worlds to join together like voices in a part song. I want these imperiled walls to sing in the face of threat, complex harmonies eyes can receive and mind hold close. I'm grateful that we did that. We do still hold all that close. I am going to read some fire poems, but this little book has an essay at the end that's sort of the tail that wags the dog, and it's thanks to so many people in so many ways, many of the Morgan poets who made it possible for us to truly restart and build a new life. One of those people, a very important one of those people, was Eric Muller. At the time we were moving into our present house, Eric was in home hospice. And one of the things he did while he was in home hospice was select from his collection, his library, boxes of his books, many with his inscriptions, his notes, to be given to me after his death. And Ann Muller brought them to our house and gave them to us. Eric's last little collection, which he sent us before his death, is called Dreamer. I wish I could read the title poem, but it's an extraordinary poem, and if you haven't encountered it, I'm not quite sure how to obtain the book now. I would guess Ann Muller would know. would have some. It's a persona poem, a multi-part persona poem that gets the whole arc of a life of a female artist. How did he bridge that? It's convincing, it's compelling. He bridged it through place. That poem is set in the time and place in the Manhattan neighborhood where he and his brother grew up. So instead of reading a part of that, it's in parts, but they're impossible to excerpt because each one ties in a subtle way to others. I'm going to read the penultimate poem from Dreamer by Eric Muller called Tree of Heaven, which is also called Ailanthus. I hope that people recognize that urban weed tree, which I oddly love. And that was a connection to this poem. Tree of Heaven, from my brother Carl. In the untended backyard of our Manhattan tenement, we didn't find Ailanthus growing out in the open. It grew at the fence line, at the base of the next building, where soil was hard packed. It struggled for light and air, a pressing against and leaning over sort of tree. From seed, birds dropped in a crevice. For two heathen brothers, Mother called it Tree of Heaven, though its branches snapped when we tried to climb it. A tree that didn't achieve much. More sumac than tree. We never thought it heavenly. Better than the stricken yard, the street was our playground. We took chances with traffic, the police, the bullies roaming by. One car burst through a stickball game and knocked the batter flat. His father came running, kneeling by his son, keening, Jesus, 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 until the boy's eyes fluttered. He came back from somewhere. His father cradled and lifted him up the stoop to their apartment. Tree of Heaven in the grit of the city, stickball pals, Tommy, Precious, Adonis, Jesus. We lived deep in the 50s, growing, faltering, flourishing. The backyard Ailanthus, always trying to rise, cut down, succeeded by what begins as a green index, a handful of leaves. The two heathens grew to be decent people. The Christian one includes Mother in a prayer to help accept her old stringencies. The poet's son includes her in a summer Sunday backyard where she sits reading the Times, cigarette held easily, where he arranges an ailanthus growing straight and well-formed. He allows the noisy English sparrows scrapping, cheep, cheep, their endless amours known to be rich, their family ties neglected. Eric Muller, a wonderful poem. He appreciated so much, so many other poets. A wonderful book of appreciation featuring Pauline Peterson, Lex Runciman, wonderfully. We need to write such a book on Lex's own poetry. A few from works of Wildfire, beginning with the quasi-title poem, Works of Fire. And the amount of time is hard for me to keep track of. I made this little chunks of 10 minutes each, but that was before I talked. And I realized when I talked, well, I'm going to have to scratch out some poems. Works of fire. Heated far above its melting point, the lawn tractor's aluminum engine has flowed down and pooled beneath the carcass of the chassis. Cooled and rehardened, it's a glyph in a system of writing no one yet knows. The 1-liter graduated cylinder, bargained by years back from a lab equipment surplus store, no longer measures or even holds volumes of liquid. No longer a vessel, it's become a vitreous scrunch boot no one can wear. The magnet assembly of the seismometer, set up to detect tremors that might herald the big one, has been left to stand on its own, short lad with stout legs. Refired in an inferno of blazing walls, the celadon glazed sauce boat an artist ancestor once used for rinsing her brushes has emerged rough-surfaced, a deep, iridescent magenta. Freed of their words, the book's layers on layers of pages are so much ghost mica. At a touch, they turn to white clay powder. Now you must dig, archaeologist in the ash pit fire has made of your home. Now you must become curator of all the objects, familiar, dear, or half forgotten, fire has given new forms. Wish I could get more breath as well as more water. It doesn't have pockets. Depend on the sweater for that. Okay, and somebody should, I can really stop at any point, so I hope that this is sort of a modular reading, but this poem is a little longer, but short lines, short little groupings. It's called Leaves. How to read these leaves? Not tea leaves or tree leaves, those all burnt in an instant to ash. Not whole leaves of books either, only white clay powder left from the thousands once on our shelves. Except for these half-dozen pale, char-edged ovals of heat-crisped paper scattered amid skeletons of bushes and blackened trunks of firs. Not portrait ovals, like the fading photograph of her father that my mother kept in an oval tin frame on a bureau across from her bed, but broad ovals, centers of pages from a landscape format book. Not the Divine Comedy, or the complete plays of Shakespeare, not the Atlas of the Heavens, but, fire being an ironist, the Reader's Digest Guide to Gardening. Flimsy discs of paper that escaped the flames, blew free and scattered when that book burned from the outside in. How to read these leaves, singed paper printed recto and verso, though no way now to tell which was which, and only guesswork to infer their order. These fragments, text and line drawings, that alone remain from our house of books. how to take amid the sudden wreckage. Their advice on repairing a lawn, on selecting shrubs, on pruning. Their list of insect pests with signs of each and chemicals to combat it. Their descriptions of species that grow well in wet places, their account of the uses and types of houseplants, their guide to propagating cacti. Here in this black and cinder-gray wildfire landscape, under a sky glowering rust-red, here where we lived amid shrub and flower borders eked from rocky soil, native plants tenderly nursed, vigorous invasives yearly cut down and pulled out only to surge back, decades-old stands of firs, multi-trunked maples and oaks, pasture fenced and cross-fenced, new bridge over the seasonal creek. How to take these random remnants of gardening guidance, except as a sardonic reminder, all is vanity. Unless, perhaps, as haphazard hints to a way beyond, begin again by watching what returns, tending frail shoots, wresting out robust weeds. Begin again by planting. And what to make of this? On one flame-spared page scrap, no words, only a delicate line drawing of an orchid, perfectly fitting within the oval fire had cut. See what I mean? It's works of wildfire. Fire. I couldn't have done such a thing. The imagination was that of the fire. Tom, I'm going to ask you for time guidance because my sense of, you told me this hugely generous 40 minutes. I don't know when we started. But give me a terminus so I can select. Wonderful. if they can, okay. This will give me a little bit of. I think actually maybe I timed it pretty well. I don't trust myself on these things. By some strange coincidence, this reading planned back last summer, when they were scheduled, comes a month after our burned land sold. And sold to our great pleasure to a couple of people who I think will treat it well and make good use of it. So it's, we haven't quite gotten accustomed yet to not having its concern for it, responsibility for it on our shoulders. So we're kind of just trying to absorb that. The place we left is no longer the place we left. Soon after we fled that night, the shaggy spires of firs must have become so many 50-foot torches. When we first went back, we found charred black trunks raining down dead needles. Salvage logging turned the burned woods into stump fields, into gouged earth strewn with hacked-off fir limbs and studded with a few clumsy heaps of slash. Now, nearly a year since the fire, the ravaged land hosts a battalion of mullein. dozens of coarse, eye-level stalks, where past years' firs canopied native shrubs. The place we left is no longer the place we left, no longer our address. We chose not to rebuild in that changed place. Instead moved to this 1950s subdivision between old orchards and town. How calmly the single-story houses stretch out on their shrub-bordered lots. On the wires overhead, plump doves proclaim territory. Does anyone here know how swiftly and completely a long, familiar landscape can be undone? Well, we found a new house for us, a new half acre for us, down from 8, in Dallas. And I think many of you know Dallas is the home for 40 years of Clem Stark. Well, the very first reading that Clem gave after the pandemic was at the Dallas Public Library to a wonderfully appreciative audience of locals. And we were there for the first time among the locals. It was a wonderful reunion. And subsequently, Clem welcomed us to Dallas, inviting us to the wonderful farm that he has, the farmhouse and shop that he reconstructed there. I think he'll always be the dominant presence for us there. I'm going to read one of the poems that he read in that reading in Dallas. It's included in his very last collection, which Empty Bowl Press put out, so he had it in his hands before he died. Silk purses and sow's ears. It's not true you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. You can, but it takes time. I'm resurrecting these old wood windows I salvaged 40 years ago, dismantling houses for a living. They were intended for the shop I was building, but I never got around to restoring and installing them. For 40 years, they've been stashed in the barn, collecting dust, derelict, paint peeling, glass broken, parts missing. You should see them now. Old paint stripped, glass replaced, some completely reconstructed, all of them newly glazed and freshly painted, set like jewels or poems in the rough sawn board and bat siding of the shop. One silk purse after another. I hope he could hear that. Yes. So, tough decision. I'm going to read one last. I won't read a funny one. I'll read a real last. If she can find it, Okay. Still the light. Barely turned 30, I wrote the dying from brain cancer of a man my age. A young gay man in a time when other young gay men were dying of AIDS. He died of what is still beyond treatment. Hardly acquainted before his illness, we grew close through his dying and through my writing it. His was the first death in which I saw my own. Now I've survived him to twice and a half his life. I survived to know and write the loss of a mother by long estrangement and then by death, the loss of a father by slow alienation and then by death, the loss of a loved place by leaving it, the loss of the job that had drawn me to leave it, the loss to wildfire of a loved place with nearly all the year's gatherings it had held, among them those first poems of a friend's dying and those small footholds of words from after his death. Remember to start over, start small. When we wake to pee, Sirius shining blue-white out the west window. All those losses, but amid and between them, still the light. Still sunlight through leaves, through petals, through the perked ears of cats. Sunlight flooding rooms brimful, then ebbing away. Then dusk, then the gloaming. Those beautiful words. I don't need all those things
No,
this time.
okay.
Just my water and my Kleenex.
Well, thank you so much. So what we're doing is having a brief question and answer period with Eleanor. And I'm going to ask her a question in a minute. Kristen has got the microphone. So she's going to bring the microphone around. When you have a question, if you could speak into the mic, because we'd like to get that on the recording, as well as Eleanor's answer. And then we're going to do that for, 10 minutes or so. And then Eleanor is going to finish with a final poem. So I thought I'd start with a question. There's so many things that occurred to me, but I've been reading some of your things. And really, what would you like to tell us about writing? I thought that this is going to be an open-ended question, but in terms of just an opportunity to, what have you learned about writing that you want to tell us? What works for you? When do you write? When don't you write?
I suppose I've learned to be gentle with myself. Not to beat on myself if the poems aren't coming or if the drafts aren't taking shape, but to let it take time. And I'm just grateful to have lived long enough to have gone through that experience enough times that I trust it at this point. And the writing I value most is the writing that feels to me compelled. And I just try to be prepared to be adequate to it when I am compelled. It's the best I can do.
Well, thank you. Any questions that anyone has? Bob? Thank you.
So, Eleanor, when you were president of the OPA, did you actually find time to write?
My memory of that period is hazy. No, actually, I think I did, because there was a lot of inspiration all around me, and I was younger and had more stamina. And the second time I was president, Elisha Ansari was vice president. That made it a lot easier, especially because she was so darn prolific. Forgive me for facetious answer.
Anyone else? Kristen?
You? Yeah, you go first.
It's been a hard time for some of us, and it was sweet to hear before the fire, before the COVID, there was a little whimsy. I had a hard week about, 2 months ago, where 4 friends died. Clem being one of them, Jeff Stonehill, another one, another poet. And I've been asking, where are the adults? Where are the adults? And then you read that that one about the leaves, the ovals of what was left of the books about the garden. And I said, oh, they're in the room. Thank you, thank you. Do I have a question? No. I have gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sometimes I think we all wonder what difference, what impact to anyone. Thank you.
I was trying to understand how to me, when I was listening to you read, I was like, there's two different, there's a person writing this poem and there's a person reading it. And I don't know where my question is going other than it's an observation, and I just kind of wondered, who is the person who wrote the poem? I guess that is my question, and who's the person who delivered it? There's a healthy distance between you reading it and the person who wrote it, but they're still very connected. So it's seamless and it's gorgeous and it's so well done. I was floored at the end of all your poems, just completely floored. But I was wondering, how long did it take you to build the relationship between the person who's writing the poetry and the person who's speaking it? It's incredible.
It's a wonderful question. And I've never analyzed it that way. I'm thinking actually, I began writing poems the same way Clem continued to write poems all his life. And that is composing in my head out loud before I ever put anything on the page. I don't do that process now. I scribble in a notebook. I care very much about the page, so I go pretty quickly to a computer and look at it. But I'm always, as my husband knows, whose study is no longer downstairs from mine, but right next door, I'm always reading it, reading it, reading it. And when one thing was completely absent from the poems I read, my mother was an actress. So a performer, and as I began to write poems as a child, she would perform them, and I would cringe, I would writhe. It was not how I heard the poem in my head, and almost in, as an act of rebellion, as an act of reclaiming my work, I tried to learn to perform them. Having an in-person audience makes a huge, huge difference. I just feel the energy. That doesn't mean I'm not very grateful to everyone who's listened to the live stream or will listen to a recording, but it's the presence of every one of you in the room that makes performance possible for me. I know Clem felt that way too, to the extent he never gave a reading via Zoom. We were privileged, Richard and I, to hear that first reading after the pandemic. An audience is wonderful. That's another thing that the OPA conference in person will make possible.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Is there one final question before we go to the final poem? If anybody has a final thing that they want to ask, and if not, can we have a final poem? Yes. What? Good. Oh, good. That's the plan.
This one will be, I think, a gentle one. Generally speaking, I don't write persona poems, though many people, for people who do persona poems well, they are marvelous acts of empathy. What happens to me is, no, it's not there, sorry. What happens to me is that I feel I'm imposing, I feel that I'm projecting all the things I don't want to do. But this is a persona poem. It's called Survivor. I'm a three-legged pottery pig, not much bigger than the ball of your thumb. Conchitos, they call us in Chile, where the idea started that we bring luck. But what can one as small as I do to stop a fury of wind-driven flame? I guess I had only enough luck to save myself. All of me, hardly more than a shard of anything else. A gloved hand lifted me up from the rubble of the house and all it had contained, gently brushed the coating of ash from my belly and back. So I was rescued by the people who'd once gotten me as a gift from a friend. Joined now by a few brand new pig figurines, I stand on my three legs in the living room of a different house where my people moved after the fire. Smoke blackened, I look dingy beside a spiffy opalite pig with all 4 legs. The people must know by now I'm not much good for bringing luck. But I think they're glad I survived, small, sturdy tripod that I am.
Thank you so much, Eleanor, for a very rich and heartfelt evening. So we're delighted that you were here. Eleanor's books are in the table back here, so please check with the bookseller. The bookseller right here, about them. There's some cookies over here, so please help yourself. If you would like to take some with you, please do that. That's what they're for. And there are some broadsides and some posters. Please feel free to take them. We'd love to have you place a poster somewhere that is calling out to have a poster. In any event, thank you very much for being here. Good night.